card. They do play Force of Wills, but it's not always a guarantee that they have Force plus blue card.
Yeah, I feel like I'm with you. I feel like Elves has the advantage simply because they can win by just getting an army of Elves into play very early, or they can just win after board by just searching out a Progenitus sometimes. That can usually be good enough. I think game one, the Elf player is probably favored, whereas after board, Andrew does have some cards they can bring in, but still, I think he's probably a little of a bit of a dog simply because of how bad the game one matchup is.
Turn one is a Nettle Sentinel from Thomas Graves. Andrew's going to go ahead and crack a fetch line of his own. Interestingly enough about the Andrew Tenjum build of Shardless Bug is he has moved all 4 of the Hymn to Turoks to his sideboard.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, he plays 4 copies of Force of Will, though, so you can't not have Force of Will or Hymn to Turok in your deck. You need one or the other in order to compete with some of the combo decks out there.
You're either need to 2-for-1 yourself or 2-for-1 your opponent.
Exactly, yeah. And I think Force of Will, you know, he obviously decides that card is a little bit more important. So, Andrew here, not a great start for him. I mean,
Ancestral Vision, it's a good setup. Now, I don't know if the game is going to last. That card may never come out of exile.
Visions is one of those cards. It's good against some decks, not very good against Elves, though.
And you actually see that Thomas may have one of the turn 2 wins here. If without disruption, he does have Nettle Sentinel and double. He has Heritage Druid with Nettle Sentinel and double Glimpse in his hand. So
yeah,
he can go pretty deep here.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to see a Green Sun Zenith, probably for a Wirewood Symbiote here.
So he's gonna wait a turn. So Green Sun's
yep. Because again, you have to get pretty lucky. He just doesn't have enough velocity there. I think
with Green Sun Zenith for Symbiote.
Yeah, my guess is he's going to Zenith for 1 here. Probably a Symbiote or a Ranger. Looks like he put a Deathrite Shaman to the top of the pile there. So,
well, if he gets, he's going to go ahead and go for Deathrite Shaman.
I think he just wants mana, I guess. But again,
if he went for the one of Birchlore Rangers, no, you're right. He
can't go off on turn 2. He's way far. But I think turn 3 is certainly reasonable. But I think Wirewood Symbiote was kind of key there because you need to, if you don't draw an Elf, you want to be able to bounce an Elf so you can recast it to get more mana. Because he has that Gaia's Cradle, which is huge.
Yeah, well, I mean, he to be fair, he's on turn 3. He's got plenty of gas here. You can start with two Glimpses, Heritage Druid, and a Gaia's Cradle. So you should have plenty of mana. It's the worries if he bricks those first 2 card draws and then the card draw for his turn.
Yeah, so Thomas's play actually is fine because he will be able to go Glimpse, and then use the Deathrite Shaman to cast a Heritage Druid, so then he can play the Cradle and tap it for 3 mana and try to go off that way. So he really just needs like a Heritage Druid or a Birchlore Ranger to kind of, or another 1 mana Elf rather.
Yeah, next turn he certainly has enough velocity. So we see a Brainstorm from Tenjum. He's going to need some sort of interaction this turn. You see Liliana's hand. That's going to be too expensive. Certainly if he taps out here without a Force of Will or some sort of kill spell, that's going to be off to the races for Thomas Graves.
Yeah, it looks like he does have a Thoughtseize, so that's a good start. He did draw an Abrupt Decay. Unfortunately, he won't be able to cast it. So has a Polluted Delta. He's going to sack it, probably go for a Bayou here and cast a Thoughtseize.
Yeah. Now, the thing is that Elves is traditionally a deck that's pretty resilient to Thoughtseize, and Thomas Graves' hand is no exception here. Andrew can take the Heritage Druid, but that's still leaving Tom with a double Glimpse hand, which is a pretty dangerous spot.
Yeah, I think you have to take the Heritage Druid, though, because obviously Glimpse Heritage Druid still effectively combo. I mean, he's more likely to brick, but basically you just need him to dodge 1 creature this turn.
Now, actually, I would say in Andrew's spot, I almost want to take a Glimpse because I feel like Thomas has an abundance of mana already with Gaia's Cradle. I feel like the way he bricks more often is by bricking on creatures rather than running out of mana here.
Yeah, but Heritage Druid is still pretty good with that board. I mean, he's got Nettle Sentinel and Heritage Druid, so
they're all great with the board.
Maybe because of the Gaia's Cradle, maybe you just want to make sure he can't cast double Glimpse, and then if he draws a 1 mana Elf.
Right.
There's plenty of 1 mana creatures in his deck.
It's possible if he single glimpses that he just draws a bunch of lands on that turn and has to pass.
Yeah, so that's exactly what he does. He does take the glimpse. So, it makes total sense there. He doesn't want to. He's unlikely to brick on a creature.
Yeah, I mean, nonetheless, this is probably a combo turn for Thomas.
Oh, and if he attacks, then it's definitely not a combo turn. He has to wait.
Yeah, this deck, unlike some of the other ones, it cannot cast Emrakul, so.
So interesting. He's not going to be able to cast Greater Behemoth this turn, or search out a Greater Behemoth.
Now, if he makes about 100 Elves,
it's still fine. Enough. Yeah, he's still going to be able to overwhelm the board with Elves, but don't think he needed to attack just there. You're probably going to get a chance to untap your Nettle Sentinel.
First card was Glimpse, and we are off to the races. 1 Glimpse has been activated. There's 3 green mana, down to 2 to untap Nettle Sentinel. That's for Quirion Ranger with a card draw. He has 2 Symbiotes in hand, 2 green floating.
So now he's in pretty firm position here with the Wirewood Symbiote along with Quirion Ranger. He should never run out of elves to kind of keep casting.
Symbiote for a card, Deathrite Shaman for a card. He's now out of mana. Remember, he has not made a land yet this turn, but he does have 3 untapped elves right now. So with Heritage Druid, he's back to having 3 green. It will be Symbiote down to 2, untap of Nettle Sentinel.
He hasn't used any of the Symbiotes or the Rangers yet either.
His entire hand is lands right now, so he's actually out of cards at the moment. He can double bounce with these 2 Symbiotes, so he's still got 2 more elves. He will use 1 Symbiote to untap Deathrite, bounce Quirion. Now he didn't use that Quirion activation. Because he has so much mana, that's not really a concern. Quirion will be cast, another card draw off Glimpse. Finds another creature to go into. Remember, there is now 1 mana left, so that's back down to 0 for Heritage Druid.
Looks like he's going to activate Nettle Sentinel to get a little bit more value out of it.
Sure, 4 green down to 3 now for Heritage Druid.
Oh, did he miss the trigger?
He missed an untap on Nettle Sentinel. That would probably be just fine. And this is where the Elf deck has taken a new turn. It no longer really goes infinite, so to speak. It's just combos until it finds a natural order, which he has found right now. Second Symbiote activated, untapping Deathrite. He's going to bounce Quirion Ranger. Quirion Ranger casts this time and untaps Nettle Sentinel, draws another card, and now it's another Glimpse.
And he still has not played a land for a turn, so
yes,
here's the
now
Gaia's
his land,
Cradle.
that's the Gaia's Cradle. Gaia's Cradle will go ahead and right now tap for 8 if he needs it to.
So yeah, so you can tap for 8 mana.
And he just pass the turn. Next turn, planning to natural order into Craterhoof for the win.
Yep. So Andrew, facing an army of elves and insectile aberrations, decides to just concede right there.
Yeah, Charlotte's Bug doesn't play any actual sweepers. It's interesting, even something like a Drown in Sorrow would be very good there. Any sort of sweeper, but he doesn't have any. So Shrivel would be excellent.
Shrivel. He's got Golgari Charm in his sideboard, so.
Right. So speaking of a sideboard, I would imagine that's a card that comes in that it would save him in situations like that.
Yeah, he's got 3 Nile Spellbombs, 2 Massacre, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Notion Thief, 2 Phyrexian Revoker, and 4 Hymn to Torok. Really, Hymn to Torok, obviously, I think is a card that you could bring in here. It's a way to kind of try to disrupt Thomas. Golgari Charm, obviously a card that you want against Thomas's deck. I also kind of like the Massacre too. Obviously, you can't cast it for free, but it's still, if you can get to 4 mana or even use Deathrite Shaman, there are times where you just need to be able to get some creatures off the board.
So in this matchup, I think what really matters for Andrew is you saw that game, he only got to play turns 1 and 2, and then the game was over. So he's going to need cards that impact the board really fast. I think Golgari Charm's great. Massacre can cost 0. Well, Thomas doesn't have any white sources.
Yeah, he doesn't have any. He does have a 1 Savannah in his deck, but the thing is, I think that Andrew's deck, if his goal has to be with Hymn to Torok and Golgari Charms to kind of slow down Thomas enough that he could actually get to 4 mana, because it's harder for the Elf deck to go off after game 1 because your opponent's going to be a little bit more prepared. They're going to have a lot more removal spells, so I think it's going to be harder for Thomas to go off after board. Either way, Andrew has a lot of cards that are pretty terrible in this matchup. He's got 4 copies of Ancestral Visions. He also has 3 copies of Liliana the Veil, which aren't really that great, but I think he's got to keep them in simply because of Progenitus. So
it gives him an out to that.
It gives him an out. So if Thomas does try to go for the Progenitus draw, a combination of like Golgari Charm plus Liliana Veil could sweep up the board and force him to sacrifice just a Progenitus to Liliana Veil.
Yeah, and so Hymn to Torok is good on the play. On the draw, it is slow. I agree that I think it comes in just because he has a lot of cards that could do more in the matchup.
Yeah, the question is Force of Will. That's really the card that I don't know what he's going to do with. Obviously, Andrew's played this deck a lot. He's very familiar with Shardless Bug. He's got some success with it in the past. The question is, I don't think Ancestral Visions is really good enough in this particular matchup. So if you're boarding out Ancestral Visions, do you have enough blue cards for Force of Will to be effective?
Well, the problem is that your 2 worst cards in this matchup would be like Ancestral Visions is pretty bad. Shardless Agent is also pretty weak in the matchup. You just don't have time to establish that kind of value. And once you board out 8 blue cards, the Force of Wills almost have to come with. There really aren't enough blue cards left. So if he wants to keep in Force of Wills, he'll probably have to keep in Shardless Agents.
Yeah, so It's going to be a tough. I honestly think he probably boards out the Visions, the Force of Wills, and a couple of Shardless Agents for Massacre, Golgari Charm, and him to throw up.
Yeah, there's also some benefit for Phyrexian Revoker, just because it does more than some of the other cards he has in his deck. It could name a Heritage Druid. It could also name Deathrite Shaman or Wirewood Symbiote. Those are all cogs to Thomas's deck. It's a little slow. Paying 2 mana for a 2/1, as we saw there, the game was over on turn 3. So if you're going to cast it, that's like one of the pivotal turns of the game. You'd rather be doing something more impactful. But it's not dead.
No, it's not dead, and certainly a card. The other card is Notion Thief. I mean, obviously 4 mana is not really a card you want to be boarding in, but it could stop the Glimpse draw.
Yeah.
But the question is it just too slow? But I'm with you. I think that Andrew has so many cards that aren't really effective in the game one in his main deck that it might be worth just boarding out like Shardless Agents, Force of Wills, and Visions for cards that are a little sketchier, but still probably a little more impactful.
Yeah, and I think with Notion Thief, one of the things is that post-board Elves is much less of a Glimpse-reliant deck and much more of just a natural order Craterhoof deck.
But it's still good against Elvish Visionary, too.
It's good. The question is,
it's still fine, yeah.
Can he cast it?
Yeah, it's a matter of can he cast it, but is it better than Shardless Agent? Shardless Agent can potentially find you an Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, it's like, would you rather have Shardless Agent plus random card in the deck or Notion Thief?
Yeah, probably Shardless Agent.
I think I agree. So we are underway. Andrew, they will have a turn 1 Thoughtseize, so we'll get to see what he's playing against. It is a 4-land hand. It's pretty heavy for Elves, with Kasali Pride Mage, Wirewood Symbiote, and Heritage Druid. This is a weaker hand from Elves, and certainly one that I think Andrew can capitalize on.
Yeah, Symbiote seems like the most powerful card in the hand. Let's see if Andrew decides to go for a Symbiote there. Obviously, Heritage Druid could be impactful later on, but for now, I still think, one of the ways that Elves grinds out their opponents after board is just Wirewood Symbiote, Elvish Visionary.
Exactly. So he's deciding what to take here, and yeah, I think the Symbiote's probably the card. It really depends on what kind of follow-up Andrew has, but he's going to go ahead and take the Symbiote there.
So Andrew writes down his hand, falls to 18, and passes the turn. And there is that Elvish Visionary. So.
A good take on Symbiote. Interestingly, if Thomas wants to cast the Pride Mage, he'll have to fetch for a Savannah, which will open himself up to a possible Massacre.
Yeah. So it looks like we have a Brainstorm here for Andrew.
Yep.
He has a fetch land as well.
He's kept in the Force of Wills. You see him drawing a Hymn to Turok there, so that has come in out of the sideboard.
It looks like he has Abrupt Decay as well. Yeah, multiple copies of Abrupt Decay, I think.
It's Abrupt Decay. It's possibly Golgari Charm, 2 cards very similar. I think you are right, though, that is Abrupt Decay. He has a Liliana in his hand, and I think that's some of the cards in the deck really are less impactful. Liliana is good in concert with the rest of the cards he's playing. If he can Thoughtseize into Abrupt Decay, then Liliana's a great turn 3. Problem is you can't just play Liliana without the thing is it's those pre-game cards that are the more important ones, the lead up to her.
So Andrew likely going to sacrifice his Verdant Catacombs at the end of the turn. I'm not sure if he wants to draw the cards on top of his deck, but Thomas here is going to sack. He's going to find that Savannah, like you mentioned, so expose himself a little bit to Massacre, perhaps, but we're not sure if Andrew boarded in or not. And now it looks like he drew a Green Sun Zenith for the turn, so he's got a Kozali Pride Mage, Elvish Visionary, and a Green Sun Zenith. I'd probably expect him to lead with a Visionary here. You don't really want a Zenith just yet. Visionary is a pretty good card for you. If you can Green Sun Zenith next turn to find a Wirewood Symbiote, that's pretty good.
He's going to go for Kasali Pride Mage here and actually just start on an aggro plan, though.
Interesting.
That's aggressive. Visionary is a good way to buy time as a card. It lets you develop your board presence without really committing at all. But it looks like he's more committed to the damage plan this game.
Yeah, so Thomas is going to play Kozali Pride Mage and Andrew's now just going to sack his Verdant Catacombs. He doesn't like the 2 cards on top of his library. I think he put a Abrupt Decay and a Force of Will on top of his library, so didn't really value those cards right now.
Well, I like the way he played the Force of Will. He had one, he's kept some number in, and he had one in his opening hand, kind of as an insurance policy against a really broken draw. Once Thoughtseize Thomas saw that he was relatively safe, now he's able to use Brainstorm to shuffle it away, because Force of Will, at the end of the day, not the best disruption spell.
Yeah, it's more or less an insurance policy. You don't want to lose to the really insanely broken draw, but you really don't want to two for one yourself either.
All right, 3rd land from Andrew, and he had the option to cast Liliana instead or Hymn to Turok, instead opts for neither.
Yeah, has an Abrupt Decay up, so wants to make sure that nothing too crazy happens here.
All right, Graves will make Elvish Visionary. slowly getting more and more of a board presence. You see another Visionary, a Green Sun, and a Natural Order in his hand. He now has well, remember, Kozali Prime Mage is not an elf, so he actually doesn't have mana yet.
But he has 3 mana, so now he has 1 mana floating, so he actually can cast Natural Order this turn and find a Progenitus.
Right,
I think he might just go for it here. I mean, obviously it's scary because Andrew has 3 mana up, but I think he just goes for it because he has to assume that the only card he has to worry about is really Force of Will.
He's going to go tapping 3. He's going to go ahead and Green Sun for 2. Now the question is whether or not, or possibly 3. We'll see whether or not Tenjum wants to use an Abrupt Decay.
It might be for 1. Yeah, I think it's for 1. So he has 4 mana in his pool. He uses 2 of them to cast Wirewood Symbiote. Now he can bounce the Visionary, untap a Heritage Druid, and then replay a Visionary.
Exactly.
So I kind of like this route by Thomas. He's playing it a little slow, a little more conservatively. I think the fact that Andrew left 3 mana up kind of concerns him a little bit. He doesn't want to expose himself to, Golgari Charm and then Liliana or something like that. But he's playing a little conservatively. This is the grindy strategy that he has here. He's not in a rush to kind of kill Andrew right away.
All right, the recast Elven Visionary, that's the last of Thomas's mana. And we'll go ahead and draw a card. It's another Symbiote. So that engine of Symbiote Visionary really is getting cranking for Thomas.
Yeah, so really great sequence there for Thomas. He's developing his board state. Andrew really just needs one of those board sweepers right now, stat. He needs Golgari Charm or that Massacre potentially if he boarded it in.
And on end step, that Abrupt Decay will take care of Wirewood Symbiote.
Yeah, but the damage was done, more or less. So.
Well, this is where Elves is really good. Thomas was able to play 3 cards in 1 turn, 3 more creatures, and his hand is the same size as it was when he started.
Yeah, so it looks like Andrew could go him to Torak, and he still might have... Oh, he has Vendilion Click. Okay, so it looks like we might see a Vendilion Click here.
Yeah, well, the problem on Andrew's side is that he hasn't been able to put a clock down. Sure, he's disrupting, but... Elves is really a critical mass deck. Removing individual pieces doesn't really shut it down.
Yeah, Andrew's already at 12, so Thomas might just start swinging in with everything,
Yeah. We see Vendilion Click, so it's Birchlore Rangers, Natural Order, Wirewood Symbiote, and 2 lands. If you're Tenjum, I think you have to take the Natural Order here. You right now don't have an answer to it in your hand.
Especially since, he doesn't have an answer. He can't just let a True Progenitus come into play.
Yeah. Or much worse, actually, a Crater Hoof here.
Or he could try to level Graves and let him have the Natural Order, bluffing he has an answer to it.
Bluffing he has a force.
Yeah, because you have to think, why would he let me have the Natural Order if he doesn't have an answer to it?
Exactly.
But let's see what Andrew decides to do here. He does, he just has a Liliana Veil and a Hintertork in his hand. So if Thomas does cast the Natural Order, it's going to resolve. So that's exactly what he does. He basically says, all right,
gets rid of the Wirewood Symbiote.
I'm gonna make it so that you think I have an answer to Natural Order.
Yeah, he's clearly bluffing a Force of Will here. So the Natural Order, in conjunction with Gaia's Cradle, Natural Order for Crater Hoof would be a lethal play for Thomas here.
Yeah, it's definitely lethal. So let's see if Thomas sees through the bluff here.
The thing is, Thomas might just check the bluff. The investment that Thomas has to make is actually pretty low to call the bluff, and that's the danger of making this sort of bluff.
That's why I don't like that bluff, because like you said, the investment's so low. He's going to have a good turn here,
no matter what. He's going to sack a Dryad Arbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to sack my Dryad Arbor. Is it countered? No? Okay, then I win. If it is countered, I still have a bunch of creatures in play.
I still probably win.
Yeah, and you just 2-for-1 yourself, because Force of Will is probably your only out.
All right, and he's going to go ahead and Natural Order. It's that sacking Dryad Arbor, and the jig is up. Andrew does not have the counter spell. And I think here comes a Crater Hoof Behemoth.
Yep, no reason not to go for Behemoth in this situation, unless you're afraid of Stifle. But
I mean, you still get a 5/5.
Yeah, you still get a 5/5. And that's the game. So Andrew Tenjum, his gambit does not pay off, and Thomas Graves wins 2-0, and now moves on to 5-0 with Elves.
Yeah, Elves has, over the last kind of 6 months, has crept up as I think one of those tier 2 combo decks to really one of the top combo decks in the format.
Yeah, I agree. Like over the last, I'd say 4 or 5 weeks, we've really been seeing people play Elves more and more. And I don't know if it started